Now, on to something that's a very timely topic now. There was a press release that came out last week sometime, and it came from JDL, and specifically your own ideas. You were advocating the fact that if Nabi Berry is going to be held responsible in this situation, why not hold his family equally responsible? And the JDL said they would personally hold his family here, I believe it's in Dearborn, personally responsible. What does that mean?
Well, I don't know really what they can do, but I think that the basic point made is that we're in a very dirty game, and Americans have got to learn that when you're fighting people who are evil, you can't be good. There is a time for war and a time for peace, and I'm trying to get through to the people that this is the Middle East and not the Middle West.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to play fire. You have to play their game. The only language they'll ever understand is if they are hurt. There are no rules here. Now, if the Americans are not ready to grasp that concept and fight fire with fire, I promise you that every American, whoever flies, every tourist who is overseas in this area, he'll be an open target.
Yeah, he'd be an open target. But what do we do here? What do we here in the United States? Why are we so double-minded? Are we double-minded? Are we soft? What are we doing? I mean,
I think that this is a very long process. I think it's a process that is really an ideological one. Liberals, when they began to base their lifestyle and their ideology and their entire life on a concept that, well, we really can't know what is right because everyone is, democracy, and each one has it's his right to speak up, and who are you to tell me that you're right and I'm wrong? And right lost its objectivity. There was no longer objective truth. So that suddenly we began doubting, well, who knows what is really right and what is really wrong? And when on top of that, we had the good life, we were so willing to, or rather, we were so frightened of losing that we're ready to give in on everything and push it off and gloss it over with an ideology of, well, really, they're also right. There is objective truth in this world. There is objective evil, there is objective good. And on the day that we grasp that, then we'll also have the courage to go and say, for good you have to fight, and you must wipe out evil. That is an imperative. Wipe out evil.
Last week, one of our callers called in and said, if we ever got in touch with you, would I please ask you a question? And it goes as follows. What is the difference between the Old Testament God and the New Testament God? In other words, many people now see it as turning the other cheek or repaying an evil with a kindness. Or even if we go into the book of Proverbs and King Solomon's sayings, that indeed you can heap burning coals on your enemy's head if you feed him or give him a drink of water. What about that line of thought, the real sort of religious conscience of kindness? When does that evaporate? Do we ever just sort of do away with that in a time of crisis?
Well, quite clearly in Judaism, there is no Old Testament God and New Testament God. There's only God. And when it speaks about one's enemy and treating him kindly, we're not speaking about an enemy of the people. We are speaking about, on a personal basis, a quarrel, a neighbor, an angry person, and so on. Certainly, when it comes to that, you have to overlook and forgive and so on. But when you're dealing with evil people, you don't forgive evil. This is more than just your personal enemy or a personal hatred or an enmity. What you want to have here are evil people who, if we gave them the power, they they would wipe out and kill and destroy innocent people. And the most outrageous thing is to say, well, I'll turn my cheek. I put it to you that there's not one person in the world who is not for violence when he or she has a very immediate problem. It's so easy to sit and talk about, well, let's not be violent if you have no problem. The essential thing is to be able to feel the pain or the potential pain of other people. So on a personal basis, if I have a next-door neighbor who's really a very, very bad person, I should try and overlook and so on and so forth. But when we're dealing with these Shiites, these are really, really dangerous people. These are haters. And the same Bible which speaks about treating your personal enemy in a different way, and and overlook it. The same Bible says, "And thou shalt burn out evil from thy midst." It's not a contradiction, not at all.
No, there's no contradiction in what you're saying, actually. But then the final question along that line of thought would be, then by counter-combating the terrorists, do we become terrorists ourselves? How do we avoid that risk, and where do we draw those lines?
Well, I mean that's like saying robbers have guns. And if we give cops guns, then they'll be just like the robbers. That's nonsense.
Exactly right.
That's like saying in World War II, because the Germans bombed Coventry in England, and then the British bombed Hamburg, that made the Germans and the British the same. That's nonsense. There's nothing wrong or right about a gun. A gun is a gun. It is wrong to use it for the wrong reason. It is right to use it for the right reason. It was Allied bombers. It was Allied guns which saved this world from plunging into a nightmare of Nazi victory.
Yes, that's true, isn't it? Then what about the biblical command, thou shalt not kill? It's still there, is it not? And then as we look at these terrorists they have killed, what about the death sentence? And what about actually following that command, thou shalt not kill?
Because it does not say, thou shalt not kill. The Hebrew says, lo tirtzach, that's the original, which means, thou shalt not murder. There's a tremendous difference between killing and murdering. And just one little, let me just give you an example. The state of Israel killed Eichmann because he murdered innocent people. There's a tremendous difference. And people that can't grasp that are people who have no sense of objective values. Liberals are ready to see everybody's side because they have none of their own.
Yeah, that's right. The thing that bothers me is that when we turn around and we see America, the beautiful, the land of the free and the brave, they are very much held hostage because it's so easy to twist their arm. What would you advocate? What would you, if you were sitting there as counselor to President Reagan, what would you tell him right now?
Well, I would tell him right now to do everything possible to get those hostages freed. But once they're freed, to announce a new policy. One, a warning to every U.S. citizen that if you're traveling overseas, bear in mind that if you're captured, we are not going anymore, ever again, to give in and your life is, it's your problem, and you go and so on. The first time, and I would make an announcement, the first time that an American hostage is taken, we will wipe out that area. It's not a few Shiites. It's all the Shiites. And people can't grasp that. This is a mentality. The Muslim world looks upon the non-Muslim world as an infidel world. And this nonsense about an extremist Shiite and a less extreme Shiite is sheer nonsense. Rabbi Berry has got to be held personally responsible for it. We just had a scene here yesterday. Tens of thousands of Shiites from southern Lebanon were sent to Beirut by the Qadis, by the Muslim priests, who urged them to go there and to defend the plane against any American effort to free these hostages.
Oh, man.
I would have bombed West Beirut to smithereens.
Nothing radical about
that. Learn that two can play this game. Nobody is holding the U.S. hostage except the U.S.
Oh, my goodness.
A lack of will. America has grown fat. America has the good life and doesn't want to lose it and doesn't want to risk anything. Well, you'll never preserve what you have unless you're ready to go out and sacrifice for it.
But sacrifice those lives? Do you think a rescue attempt should be effected?
It's much too late for that.
It's much too late for that.
It should have been done immediately.
Right.
I think that at this point, and speaking as an Israeli, I think that Israel should free the Shiites that it is holding, because Israel can never again tell America that it shouldn't be tough after what Israel did in this obscene, outrageous freeing of 1,150 bloody terrorists. That was such an obscenity. And in the Knesset, I spoke and I pleaded and I shouted, and so it was just awful.
Well,
I think that
it was awful, but
after the Shiites now.
I must admit.
After we do, bomb West Beirut out of existence.
West Beirut goes zilchy, a little construction work, and then more so.
West Beirut is the haven of the Shiites. And I can tell you one thing. When the Israeli troops rolled into southern Lebanon, which is a Shiite stronghold, in 1982, these so-called tough Shiites trembled with fear. They threw flowers at the tanks because they were afraid. Because in 82, the Israeli army had a reputation. No nonsense. In the 3 years since, thanks to peace now in this country and other leftist groups, and of course, U.S. pressure, which was incredible.
Right.
That reputation has diminished, it's dissolved like manna under the hot sun. And that's the problem. We hope, in the latest polls, it has shown an enormous rise in our strength. And with God's help, there's going to be an election very, very soon in Israel. And the new government that will be made up, I will have a great say in that. And we're going to try and bring back some good, tough, strong might for God and for good.
It seems to me I'm almost having an interview with King David of old. Many times, I must admit, they will not stand in the face of the living God. Well, I think the U.S., Rabbi, if you'll forgive this play on your words, I think that we are paying dearly for the pressure that we've put on to convince those who are there in the Middle East, particularly those even in your midst, to become like our own Mr. Softy ice cream. It's unfortunate. Where do we go from here in conclusion? The United States and their relationship with Nabi Berry, I'm sure you've seen, I should send you a clip of a newspaper where you literally see the Shiite terrorists standing in the background. Then you have several of the hostages at a table with, now get this, Rabbi, if this doesn't blow you out the window, a PR terrorist. I kid you not. If this hasn't been made a big media event, then I don't know what has been. It's ridiculous. Sometimes I think I'm crazy when I pick up the newspaper, and other times I think this time next year in Jerusalem, or maybe this time this year in Jerusalem. As always, it's been wonderful speaking with you. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Shalom. Rabbi Meir Kahane, who many people say, well, listen, this guy is a radical. Yes, he's a radical, but I'll tell you something. I wouldn't take one of his hostages, not if you paid me. You couldn't pay me to touch anything around his house. I wouldn't go out there. I wouldn't even knock over his mailbox. I wouldn't even do it. 770-3030. Reaction to that? You think it's a little stiff? Why would anyone like yourself have anyone like that on the air, people ask me. Why would you do such a thing? You know why? I think many times there's a good deal of truth in what he says. There's a good deal of truth in the fact that if you're going to get soft, you pay the price for being soft. And little reaction, 770. Some of you are getting a little mad out there. 770-3030 is our number, and we invite your calls on this. There are so many things that we do have that we need to talk about. There are some demonstrations that are coming up, and what can you say? Well, let's break away for a second here before we go to the phone lines. We have with us in studio a friend and neighbor of Rabbi Meir. Should I say that on the radio? Should I say that you're a friend even? Well, he's a neighbor.
Because he works together with me at the Jewish Press.
Yes, so things are cool. But I'm watching your wife over here, and she is a follower. I'm watching that face. He waxed eloquent into his political thing, and she was going, I'm voting, I'm voting. I mean, I saw it. I really did. On the other hand, here's Ira Axelrod in the studio. He's pulling, you know what, in this wonderful, as sages or maven,